After reviewing my least favourite game in the series, I decided I would head back a little bit to the most important games in the series that I've never spoken about. I said important. Yes, lads, ladies, and everyone in between, I am finally playing and reviewing the original Resident Evil Trilogy. These games have been on my shelf for years and I've started up multiple playthroughs of each, but I never saw any of them through to the end. Until now, the original Resident Evil games have very quickly climbed their way to being possibly my favourite games in the whole series and of all time, with me doing multiple run-throughs including no save, best ending run of the first game, and planning to do so for the others. With all of that said, it's finally time that I share my thoughts with all of you.
Are you talking about Resident Evil?
Were you listening to anything I just said?
Because you know it's not actually called Resident Evil, right?
Yeah, I know. And I was going to mention that before you cut me off.
Oh.
Yeah, oh. Prick. Resident Evil is the name of a well-known video game series here in the West, because it's actually called Biohazard in Japan. The name was changed when it was released overseas since there were trademarking issues. Clearly someone else had thought of the name first. This then led to Capcom needing a new name and holding a contest internally. I guess Resident Evil is the best they came up with. Bit of a weird title, but I think it's more intriguing. Biohazard kinda spells out everything you need to know about the game, but Resident Evil is a title that sparks mystery. Evil in a residence? An evil residence? Haunted house? Let's find out. Resident Evil is a third-person survival horror game made by Capcom for the PlayStation 1 in 1996 and was directed by Shinji Mikami. Mikami had previously worked on games like Goof Troop for the SNES, but was brought on to Resident Evil because he was an absolute pansy and could easily tell everyone what scared him. Kinda reminds me of somebody I know, but I can't think who.
Oh, you fucking prick!
Originally, RE was meant to be a reimagining of Sweet Home, a game for the Famicom that was very similar to what would become Resident Evil. The game uses pre-rendered backgrounds with 3D models over the top, meaning the game world is made up of still images that you switch between, like Alone in the Dark. This is incredible at making the game tense, as you can't always see what is around the corner, and also allowing it to have very detailed character models compared to full 3D games released at a similar time. The game was a hit, and kept the style going for another 4 games, with 2 outliers in between. Shinji Mikami said in Retro Gamer magazine, "You couldn't really call Biohazard beautiful now. It was incredibly difficult to produce the game for the PlayStation hardware back then." Back to the game though, we start off with a simple choice. What character do we want to play as? Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield? These two have slightly different scenarios with different side characters, but gameplay is mostly the same. Jill has a lockpick on her from the start of the game, allowing her to access certain doors and drawers with supplies without the use of small keys, but she can't take as much damage. She also has 8 inventory slots and gets access to a bazooka that Chris doesn't have in his campaign. Chris can take more damage, but only has 6 inventory slots, making the game harder and meaning you need to backtrack more often. This makes Chris's scenario the hard mode of the game and Jill the easy mode. This means that 90% of the time I play the game, I play as Jill, but Chris is definitely worth playing once you've gotten more experienced. The next thing we see is a live-action FMV cutscene showing us the events that lead up to our gameplay. This is charming for the time, but not incredible to watch now as it is very cheesy. It works and sets up the game well enough that the scenario doesn't seem too contrived. There is a little bit of mystery surrounding these FMVs, mainly to do with the cast. They were all credited under aliases, none of them using their actual real name. This has made tracking some of these actors down incredibly difficult, and while most have been found, like Chris, Barry, Wesker and Rebecca, there are still some that haven't been found to this day, like Joseph and Jill, with her case being the most frustrating, as even other cast members can't remember who she is or have any contact with her. But hopefully they'll be found someday and realise that they're in one of the most successful games of all time. But I digress. Our characters are attacked by zombie dogs after going to look for their missing teammate in the mountains outside Raccoon City. They run for a mansion in the distance and we get our first taste of the incredible voice acting.
What is this? Wow, what a mansion!
Captain Wesker, where's Chris?
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Yeah, this voice acting has become infamous among the gaming community for being terrible, but I actually rather like it.
Are you fucking serious? What now? The voice acting's shite. How could you possibly like it? If you would stop interrupting and let me fucking explain, maybe you'd understand. Well, fuck you.
It gives the game an incredible charm and would set up the rest of the series to continue the trend of weird, cheesy, or downright terrible lines. Here are some of my favourites from throughout my playthrough.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
What? Oh no!
Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
You saved me!
Yeah.
It's me, Chris.
Is that you, Rebecca?
After heading into the dining room, we encounter our first zombie with this iconic scene. This is incredibly well done for the first zombie encounter, and would be repeated to even greater effect in RE2 with the lickers. It has become so iconic that many games have used similar techniques or paid homage to it over the years. The game from this point opens up quite a bit, with Jill being allowed to explore a decent amount of the mansion. The mansion layout is quite simple, a main hall with 2 wings and 2 floors. However, it's how all these rooms connect together that makes the layout so incredible. All these rooms twist and turn into one another with different paths to access both wings of the mansion without ever having to pass through the main hall. There were times in this game where I remained on one side of the mansion for an extended period of time, weaving between the halls and rooms, scouring for resources and keys to aid my progress.
The remake added quite a few rooms, and coming to this version after playing that one to death, their absence was felt. The shortcut to the main hall from the painting puzzle and the door under the stairs that led to the labs were certainly missed. As you explore the mansion, the exploration is kept interesting by having frequent and dangerous combat encounters. So, from that point, let's talk about the controls.
The game uses what has become known as tank controls, where up on the D-pad moves you forward, down moves you back, and left and right turn you to the left or the right.
This can be a little jarring for some people, as we are so used to controlling our character's movement relative to the camera and not the character themselves. This has led to many claiming this style of control is clunky and outdated, but I would actually say it makes a lot of sense given the style of game this is. If we controlled the character relative to the camera in this game, we would have to constantly be changing what button we're holding down when going forwards, and it could be entirely possible to get stuck between 2 screens because you can't change buttons fast enough.
Combat in most games is based on reflexes and having a quick trigger finger. In Resident Evil, the combat is more similar to a game of chess. It's about positioning, and choosing when to engage and when to run away. When do I fire and when do I save my resources? There could be a boss fight coming up and I might need it, but you traverse this room quite frequently, so is it better to continually dodge to save ammo or to expend some now and never have to worry about that room? It's all about decision making. The combat mechanics themselves are not deep at all. Hold a button to ready your weapon, then press the action button to fire. However, readying your weapon means that you can't move, meaning you need to position yourself in a spot where you can safely fire from, but also escape from should you become crowded and need to reposition.
This makes the combat simple but engaging, as you always have to consider the layout of the room you're in and what camera angles are available to you within that layout. You might have an empty layout, but the camera angle doesn't allow you to see the zombie in front of you. This can occasionally lead to frustration when the camera just doesn't want to play ball, but it works 99% of the time. The few times it doesn't work don't detract too much from the overall experience. I actually like the combat, as in a lot of games I take unnecessary damage since I don't have the fastest reflexes. The director's cut also comes with a handy aim assist feature that automatically locks onto an enemy when you aim in their general direction.
The puzzles in this game are also really cool, as they don't require too much thought to solve, but are a test of mechanics and problem solving. A lot of puzzles involve moving objects around in a particular order. The other puzzles are often just as simple or don't require much more thought. They are my favourite puzzles in the series as they are the most memorable. A lot of people bring up this puzzle a lot in the lab areas as an example of a bad puzzle, but it's really not that hard, and there's a puzzle just like it in the first mansion visit, so it's not as if you're going in blind on what to do.
I also want to quickly mention this box art. I have the director's cut, which has this nice shiny metallic looking logo, but I do prefer the original box art. I do have one question though. Who the fuck is this supposed to be on the front cover? It kinda looks like Chris, but what face is he pulling? Is he scared, angry, shitting himself? This is a weird piece of art, but iconic nonetheless. Japanese box art is certainly an improvement, and I think it looks really cool.
You'll notice I haven't mentioned much about the story, and that's because there isn't much to say about it. It's not the best written thing, as we've heard, but the story itself is actually not bad for the time. If you want to play Resident Evil and still haven't clicked off, this is your official spoiler warning for the plot. STAR's Bravo team go missing in the Arklay Mountains outside Raccoon City after investigating some mysterious cannibalistic murders. An Alpha team gets sent in to find them and solve the case.
The Alpha team consists of Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Albert Wesker, and... I can't remember the other guy's name.
Joseph!
Joseph.
The team is attacked by some zombie dogs while searching, and the team defend themselves before running for the safety of an old mansion. Upon entering, Chris goes missing, and Jill and Barry head to the dining room to investigate. They encounter their first undead and dispatch it without an issue. When the pair head back to report their findings to Wesker, he's disappeared as well. Jill and Barry decide to search the mansion to find their teammates, along with figuring out why there are so many walking corpses roaming the halls. Jill begins her search and starts to collect some crests by solving puzzles, and the last is obtained by battling a giant BOW snake. This allows her access to the outdoor grounds of the mansion and head into the guardhouse, where she looks around some more and encounters a few more BOWs before retrieving the final key to finish searching the mansion. She heads back inside and discovers a cave system that leads to a secret lab hidden beneath the house. After digging around the lab, we find out it's owned by a pharmaceutical company called Umbrella, and the Alpha Team's leader, Albert Wesker, works for them and knew about the experiments taking place. This leads us to confront Wesker in his lab, and we face off against the Tyrant. We defeat it, collect some items to help save Chris, and then escape the mansion for good. This is the ending I got because Barry ended up dying, but here's some stream footage of me getting the best ending, where we fight the Tyrant and the whole mansion goes boom. I like this story as it's very simple and self-contained. It doesn't overcomplicate itself with series lore or random backstories for characters we don't care about. It gives us a nice story with a few different endings to add to the replay value, and is overall the most enjoyable in the series. This is all of course because it is the first, so it is establishing the lore that later games would try and expand upon to mixed results. The music in this game is some of the best ever made. The save theme is relaxing yet unnerving, and the basement theme is incredibly scary sounding.
Unless it's the DualShock version.
The DualShock version of the game was given a quickly put together soundtrack after the original composer was found to have used a ghostwriter, and while most of it may be okay according to what I've heard, this track just takes the fucking biscuit.
It's fucking ridiculous, and I don't know how they ever thought this would be a fitting replacement to the track that we had. The game's opening is the strongest part by far, as it's the most open, has the most puzzles, and has the most interesting exploration. The game becomes more and more linear as you go, with the guardhouse being a self-contained section, Mansion Visit 2 being a clear-up process, and the caves and labs being pretty linear and straightforward. This isn't me saying the second half of the game is bad, just more guided and obvious in what the next step is.
The game also has some unlockable content, including an infinite ammo submachine gun and rocket launcher, and an extra costume for Jill and Chris. These costumes change depending on which version of the game you play, and I'll leave a link in the description to see them all. The game's bosses are also something that is frequently talked about. They are good, but a little frustrating sometimes given the control style. The first fight is Yawn the giant snake, and he's the least egregious since he can be run right past with minimal to no damage taken if you do it right, which I can't. Plant 42 is a pushover since he can't move and his spit attacks are easy to dodge. Yawn 2 is a bit more annoying compared to his first fight since 1, it's mandatory by now to deal with him, and 2, the room isn't that big and he takes up at least half of your screen at any given time. He attacks with lunges that will catch you most of the time due to his size. Black Tiger is fought down in the caves and is okay, just kind of a footnote in the progression that goes down pretty easily. Tyrant is our final boss and he gets 2 battles, one in the lab which is rather easy since he slowly walks towards you and doesn't do much. It's his second fight that is the real battle. He bursts his way through the floor of the helipad as you set off a flare and charges at you, slashing at you with his claw arm. You can dodge this attack, but a lot of the time you will get hit. After doing enough damage, you are dropped a rocket launcher and blow up the Tyrant. The bosses are pretty good overall, but can offer frustration due to some of them being able to move faster than you, and the controls are not built for fast-paced combat.
One of the things about Resident Evil is it was such a success on the original PlayStation that it was ported to many different consoles throughout the years. Of course I can't sit here and look at all of them, I'm not Avalanche Reviews, but I did decide I would look at 2, Resident Evil Deadly Silence being the first.
This was released in 2006 and is a note-for-note translation of the original game onto Nintendo's little handheld, the DS. It includes some nice features though, like being able to skip cutscenes and door animations, which is perfect for those who are fond of running speed and trying to get a fast game of RE.
Like for example if you wanted to gather some footage for a review because you decided to throw a random DS port in, or something like that.
It's a pretty faithful adaptation and also includes a rebirth mode that I didn't try out, but I've heard adds more DS exclusive features. I really like the map always being on screen as it makes it a lot easier to quickly plan your route through the mansion. Plus it keeps track of your position for you so you can tell at a glance where you're heading. A very good feature. I think this might actually be slightly better than the original PS1 port due to the small improvements made that makes that gameplay a little bit faster.
This, however, is only one port of RE1. We have another to look at, the PC port.
RE1 was given a PC port upon its release, and I managed to get my hands on it and play it, and oh my god, I could never go back. The 3D models here look amazing, and they don't have to deal with the affine texture warping of the PS1, which leads to textures always looking correct on the character model. This version also allows you to skip door animations, but not cutscenes, which is a shame. We also get the highest quality versions of the original pre-rendered backgrounds. They still look quite compressed, but I will take this small improvement, and if this still isn't quite up to your taste, there are mods out there that upscale these backgrounds using AI to add that extra HD look.
This software can be a pain to get though, and I had someone else send me the files. If you want to get it working yourself, you need a Japanese copy of the original game and Gemini's classic Rebirth mod to get it running on newer hardware. But once you do that, REPC is all yours. And that is everything I have to say about the original Resident Evil. Pretty simple yet effective game that created not only a franchise that continues to go strong today, but popularised a whole genre of game with its survival horror gameplay on full display throughout. I really enjoyed my time with this game and I recommend you pick it up in any way you can, whether you're playing on actual PS1 hardware, playing the incredible remake I've spoken about before, or any of the other ports this game has. I recommend you take a chance to explore the Spencer Mansion and become a master of unlocking. This is one of the few games that I have replayed so many times that I can beat it in less than 2 hours. It is easily at the top of my favourite games list, even possibly above the remake, since that has a few sections that I think are a little annoying compared to the simplicity and higher amount of replayability of its original. So let's skip forward a couple years to 1998. The development of Resident Evil 2 was arguably a lot more troublesome than the first game.
Directed by Hideki Kamiya this time instead of Shinji Mikami, the game had a lot of issues with the lack of vision, which led to the scrapping of an 80% finished product to start again. This led to the release of the Resident Evil Director's Cut to hold fans over until the new game could be rebuilt. After seeing some of the gameplay from what is dubbed RE 1.5, I can see why they scrapped it. Character models had seen very little improvement and the environments were boring and samey to look at. I much prefer the release version of RE2 as it has a far improved look and feel to it.
Also, the PAL box art is one of the best I've ever seen. The over-contrasted black and white zombie with the pitch black background as if it's hiding in the dark and slowly creeping out to face you is one of the most unnerving things to see on the shelf, and I love it so much. Especially compared to the US box art. That font is just awful and the zombie is far less creepy. Just a quick side note, I will be using footage of the PC versions of RE2 and 3 since it looks a little nicer and it's what I decided to record for convenience.
Resident Evil 2 was released on the 21st of January 1998. Very similar to the first game in many ways, it continues to use the pre-rendered backgrounds and tank controls, but there have been a few improvements. The character models are using more polygons, the textures have more detail in them, and the backgrounds have received a slight bit of polish. The locations featured are also a lot more varied and interesting, from the infected streets of Raccoon City to the hidden umbrella lab beneath those same streets. Yoshiaki Hirabayashi was quoted as saying, "My opinion is that the police station is a good contrast to the danger of the situation the characters find themselves in. It should be a safe place, so finding it to be such a dangerous place is a very interesting motif." The game included what's been called the zapping system. Throughout the game, there are certain choices you can make during your first run that will affect your second run. You can turn on some gas in the labs, use a cord to shut some windows, and take an item pack or a submachine gun. Whatever choice you make in the A scenario will impact the B scenario. If you turn on the gas in A, the enemies will be tougher in B. If you shut the windows in A, they will open in B. And if you take the submachine gun in A, then B gets the item pack. This system is incredibly cool as it makes the two stories feel more connected during the gameplay.
Another improvement made is the two different campaigns. Unlike the first game, where the two campaigns were the same with different characters, these two campaigns are a shared story.
The game actually comes with two discs, one for Leon and one for Claire. Whatever one you put in the console first is that character's A scenario, and the one you put in second is that character's B scenario. There are two combinations, Leon A, Claire B, and Claire A, Leon B. These offer slight story variations between campaigns depending on the scenario pairing you choose. This adds a good amount of replay value to an already great game. Our story this time is also a little better. It stars our two heroes, Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield, the sister of Chris from the first game, as they make their way to Raccoon City after the whole place has gone to shit from a T-virus outbreak. There's also another virus in the city, the G virus, developed by scientist William Birkin, who infected himself with it after Umbrella tried to assassinate him and take all of his research and hard work. We meet his daughter Sherry as Claire and have to protect her from her dad, and we get to meet her mum Annette as well in the labs. On Leon's side, he meets a woman called Ada Wong, who is looking for her boyfriend John, who is actually referenced in RE1 as the same John whose login we used in the labs in that game. Ada turns out to not be telling the truth though, and depending on your playthrough, dies in one of two ways before we head to the train to escape. This is where your campaign choice makes a difference. Whatever character you play for as your B scenario, they will have to fight Mr. X, and also gets to fight the final form of William Birkin.
On that note, there is only one main boss fight throughout this whole game. Well, one boss, but you fight him over and over again. William Birkin. You fight his different forms as he continues to change and deform from the G-virus infection. eventually becoming a wall of flesh, bones, pus, and blood.
I love these fights, and the fact that each character battles different stages of Birkin is a fantastic choice, as it means you can't get the full story from playing just one character, unlike in the game's remake. The other boss fight included was Mr. X in the B campaign for each character. It is mostly just a copy and paste of Tyrant from the first game. He charges at you, has an incredibly wide swing range, and deals out massive damage. After a few minutes of running around avoiding him or doing enough damage, a mysterious figure drops you a rocket launcher in order to blow him up. Again, very similar to RE1 Tyrant, but still a fantastic fight nonetheless. There's also a few new enemies introduced here in combination with our walking corpses, Ivies and Lickers. Ivies can be found in the lab section and will shoot fluid at you. Lickers are blind and hit quite hard if they hear you. They get the honour of having their own introduction cutscene similar to the first zombie in RE1. They also force you to change your tactics of shooting zombies' head or body to shooting the floor as they are lower down. Yoshiaki Hirabayashi said, "The Licker takes the internals of the human body and lays them bare in a way that's a great, shocking contrast with the more human-looking zombies."
There are sections throughout the story where you get to play as the secondary characters from each campaign. These sections involve really simple puzzles or avoiding enemies to reach a new area, and are just kind of a speed bump in the story, and aren't difficult in the slightest. The voice acting has had very little improvement from the previous title, but I now believe that's all part of the charm these games have. The voice acting is objectively terrible, but as I said earlier, it's part of the RE DNA now, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
The combat has also remained the same from the first game, so I won't bother going into any details about it here. The variety of weapons, however, has gone up immensely. Now each character has certain weapons tied to their campaign. Claire gets a massive arsenal compared to Leon, with her being able to obtain her pistol, a grenade launcher, crossbow, submachine gun, spark shot, and if you play her B campaign, a rocket launcher. Leon, in comparison, can obtain his pistol, a shotgun, a magnum, a submachine gun, and if you play his B campaign, a rocket launcher. You can also upgrade certain weapons in RE2 by finding parts around the game world, Leon's pistol, shotgun, and magnum, as well as Claire's grenade launcher.
There are also rewards for completing the game with different rankings, including an infinite ammo rocket launcher and minigun. These rewards allow you to replay the game, but this time the power balance is flipped on its head, as you destroy everything in your path with no remorse.
There are also a few bonus game modes along with the game, like unlocking the fourth survivor, which sees Umbrella mercenary Hunk trying to escape the RPD from the sewers all the way to the front door through a convoluted path with only the items he starts off with. There is then also an escalation of this challenge with the Tofu survivor, where you do the whole challenge again, but knife only, and as a massive piece of tofu. This shit's weird as fuck, but it adds a good amount of extra challenge to the game for those that seek it. The game also has an arrange mode, which is the easiest of easy modes. The game gives you an infinite ammo submachine gun from the get-go, which makes all the encounters trivial, as now you can just mow everything down. I recommend only playing this if you've beat the game a few times and want a really chilled out game of RE2. What you've been seeing throughout this section of the video is the PC port of RE2. This is the SourceNext port, which is essentially the Japanese version of the game. To get it working and translated for this video, I used the Gemini Classic Rebirth mod in order to get the game to boot on modern systems, translate to English, and have controller support. This is the best version of the game in my opinion, as you can skip door animations, as well as having the highest quality models and backgrounds with many different settings you can change to customize your RE2 experience. It also has the best looking cutscenes across all versions, since they are near enough uncompressed and run at 60 frames per second, but they do have Japanese subtitles baked into them, so there's a little give and take. There's also the original PS1 port, which is certainly a fantastic game, however it doesn't include some of the features of the PC version, but it is still a solid port and it's the original, so I can't knock it too hard. The cutscenes here look okay, but they have these black bars on them, are pretty compressed, and half the frame rate of the SourceNext versions.
There's a few ports of the game, but they're not really worth talking about as they're not that good, or don't have any differences to what I've already spoken about, apart from the GameCube version having the worst cutscenes.
The music in this game is simply sublime. The main hall track or the save room theme are some truly classic pieces of music that should be held in the Hall of Fame for years to come. This might just be my favourite RE soundtrack apart from the first game. That will never be topped in my opinion, however this is a close second. There was actually an advert for Resident Evil 2 that was directed by the zombie legend himself, George Romero, that features Leon seeing the destruction of Raccoon City from inside the RPD. He runs down the hallway as zombies reach out for him and finds an ammo stash. A figure approaches from the doorway and Leon takes aim. Turns out it's Claire Redfield, and Leon throws her a shotgun and they prepare to take on the zombie horde.
Only complaint I have about this advert is that Claire never receives the shotgun in the release game, so makes the advert a little inaccurate, but it gets the main points across of what the game is like. So, Resident Evil 2, a solid, near-perfect sequel to the original Resident Evil that evolved the ideas that game set up in order to create a new yet familiar experience. Takes all the elements of RE and gives them a polish in order to create a smoother gameplay experience. We wouldn't have to wait long for our next survival horror kick, as we would receive the final entry to this trilogy the following year. Resident Evil 3 was the final entry in this fantastic trilogy and is more or less the black sheep in terms of its approach to the gameplay. It continues to evolve on the ideas introduced in the previous game, with the biggest one being the introduction of Nemesis.
The introduction of Nemesis is probably the biggest shake-up that the series has introduced up until this point. An enemy that follows you around and can appear at random depending on your choices. He also appears at certain points throughout the story, similar to Mr. X. Nemesis is a fantastic inclusion, as otherwise the exploration could have become stale. We already had 2 games of exploration without much threat, and Nemesis introduces a new stress, as well as a new frustration, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Another addition this game makes is the choices. The story at certain points will show a screen giving you 2 options, and you get to choose between, which will affect how certain aspects of the story play out. Locations of cutscenes will change, where Nemesis shows up while you're exploring, and a few other things as well.
Resident Evil 3 was released on the 22nd of September 1999. The development of RE3 was by far the strangest out of the original trilogy, as it was never supposed to be Resident Evil 3. It was supposed to be a side game featuring Hunk escaping Raccoon City, but since Code Veronica wasn't coming out until the next year on the Dreamcast, they suddenly decided to turn this side game into a main entry. They made Jill from RE1 the main character and got to work to give us the final entry of the Raccoon City saga.
The game has taken a step down with its models, but the backgrounds have seen yet another bit of polish. They are by far the most detailed pre-rendered backgrounds in the classic games, with the most varied environments. It's just a shame the models had to take a slight downgrade overall to get more zombies on screen. However, certain aspects of them have been improved, like the connections between parts of the limbs. The game has also made some gameplay improvements, like the new move, the 180 quick turn. Just hold back and sprint and Jill will snap 180 degrees in order to face down any threat that may be coming your way, or it just makes traversal a lot faster since you don't have to slowly turn around anymore. You can walk up and down stairs of your own accord now, rather than having to stop at the bottom step and press a button, which wouldn't appear again in the game's sequel, weirdly enough. We also have what is the most frustrating new addition to Jill's arsenal: the dodge. The dodge is mapped to either the aim button when not aiming, or the shoot button if you are. This is the first problem. The dodge should have been mapped to its own button so as to not conflict with other moves. There were many times when I would try and shoot an enemy and Jill would dash to the side, or the opposite would happen. I would try to dodge and Jill would just stand there holding her gun. The timing of this dodge is extremely finicky, since it has to be the last second before an enemy attacks, but enemies don't have an obvious wind-up animation, so you can't time it reliably and just have to wildly guess.
The game's boss fights are something that can be quite contentious. I personally feel quite mixed about them. Nemesis will appear throughout the story and exploration of the city for a fight, but most of these can be skipped or evaded. As the game goes on, there are a few Nemesis fights that are mandatory, namely in the church and the 2 towards the ending.
The church fight was by far my least favourite in the game, and I had to replay it so many times before being lucky enough to be allowed to pass. Nemesis moves incredibly quick and hits like a freight train. He's also equipped with his rocket launcher that can destroy your health. The fight at the end wasn't too bad, as I had more space to run around in, but still suffers from the same problem of Nemesis being extremely fast. The final boss with Nemesis was by far the easiest, as he is a massive blob of flesh by now and isn't as fast. Also we have a rail cannon, which decimates him in a couple hits. The Gravedigger was the only fight in the game that I just found kind of okay. The fight consists of waiting for the creature to pop out the ground, get a few shots in, and then rinse and repeat until it's dead. I reckon it's about time I cover the story, which is very interesting as it follows Jill Valentine trying to escape Raccoon City as the T-virus outbreak rages on around her. As she makes her way through destroyed streets of the city, she runs into fellow STARS member Brad Vickers, the same Brad who flew away and left us in the first game. We make our way towards the RPD that we played through in the last game, and as we enter through the front gate, we run into Brad again. But this time our meeting is cut short as Nemesis appears and kills Brad. This is our first choice in the game. Do we fight, or do we run? We make our way inside the RPD to retrieve Jill's lockpick so that we can continue to explore the streets. As we leave, Nemesis appears to hunt us down, now armed with a rocket launcher, and we have to run for our lives. We meet up with an Umbrella mercenary called Carlos, who we will slowly bond with over the course of the game, and the rest of his team, which gives us our first proper objective. We grab multiple parts throughout the city to get the tram up and running, and once we do, Nemesis shows up again and the tram derails into the church. After exploring around the church, Nemesis comes back for his first mandatory fight and infects Jill. He has now further mutated to have massive tentacles, still armed with his rocket launcher. Jill collapses after this fight and we switch perspective to Carlos as he attempts to find a cure in the nearby hospital. We run into Nikolai, one of the UBCS, and find him killing one of his teammates, but he's blown out the window in an explosion. We get the cure for Jill and explore the park. We run into Nikolai again as he acts very antagonistic towards Jill. We fight another boss known as Gravedigger. This is a giant worm that digs under the ground and springs up to attack us. After defeating him, we head out of the park towards the dead factory. We continue to explore around and meet Nikolai again, where he meets his ultimate fate of being killed by Nemesis. We enter the disposal room and have to fight Nemesis, now in a far stage of mutation. He now runs around after us with his tentacles and we plug him full of bullets until he goes down. He has dropped into some acid after we leave the room and we believe he's finally finished. We find a computer where Carlos contacts us telling us to get to the helipad as he's found a helicopter so that we can escape. We pick up a radar here which lets us know there is a nuke being launched at Raccoon City to contain the outbreak. On our way there, however, Nemesis bursts through the wall, now as a big disgusting blob. We run around and push batteries into place to power up the massive rail cannon in the room we fight in and lure Nemesis into its line of fire. Once this is done, we get our final choice in the game. Do we leave Nemesis to die, or do we finish him off? We of course finish him off and get one of the best lines in all of gaming. We leave for the helipad and escape Raccoon City as it explodes, bringing an end to the original trilogy. And this is only one version of the events. Through the different choices placed throughout the game, you can change some of the events or where they take place. The overall story will be the same, but you will have different outcomes corresponding to your actions. Makes the game incredibly replayable to see all the different ways the story can be altered.
This story is by far my favourite in the original trilogy, since it focuses more on the characters involved rather than the events going on. Since we have the context of the mansion incident and the events of RE2, we don't need to put a massive focus on the outbreak itself, but rather the effects of it on our cast. Plus, there are some background details that tell smaller stories of their own. Like towards the end of the game, there's this hallway with a bunch of dead tyrants and soldiers. There was clearly a brutal battle here with no clear winner. It's fantastic.
Let's talk ports. Once again, you've been seeing the PC version, which is much the same as RE2's PC port, including door skipping and high quality cutscenes. There's the PS1 original, which again is very similar to RE2, as well as the GameCube port being much the same as well. This makes sense though, as it was meant to be an RE2 spin-off rather than a full game. The puzzles in this game are well designed, but they will drive you up the wall. While the last two games had puzzles that were fixed, this game introduces RNG into the equation with a few of its puzzles. This means that locker codes or the time in the church will have multiple solutions depending on what RNG you get. The most well-known egregious puzzle is the water puzzle towards the end of the game. The setup doesn't seem too difficult, but this is the hardest puzzle. Trying to line up these 3 layers to match the set at the top, I spent so long trying to work this puzzle out, and I ended up looking up all the solutions to find the one that matched my game, or I could have been there for an hour longer. The game also has some cool bonus content, like epilogues for each time you beat the game, that tell you what every main character in the whole trilogy is doing after the events of the previous 3 games. There are also alternate costumes for Jill that include her classic Stars outfit, a disco attire, casual clothes, a biker outfit, and even a costume that turns Jill into Regina from Dino Crisis. There's also a new bonus mode that would return through multiple entries in the RE series, Mercenaries. The Mercenaries mode lets you play as one of the 3 main UBCS members, Carlos, Nikolai or Mikhail, as you make your way from the tram to another part of the city within a time limit, and killing zombies adds time to your timer, which means killing zombies at the right time can actually help you. Each run you do, successful or not, earns you money that you can spend on infinite ammo weapons that you can use in the main game, or earn $9,999 to get infinite ammo for all weapons in the main game. It's not something I would personally spend much of my time on, but it may very well appeal to you.
So overall, RE3, while taking some serious missteps in terms of the mechanics it introduced, acts as a nice conclusion to both story and gameplay to this trilogy of survival horror masterpieces. Brings the games to a natural conclusion with the destruction of Raccoon City and an end to the T-Virus outbreak, leaving the doors open for Capcom to take the series wherever they want to, or to leave it as a simple trilogy about this Midwestern town. And that concludes my thoughts on the original RE trilogy. This video was certainly an undertaking and has been in the works for a long time. Originally starting as just a review of RE1, but soon expanding to include the other games as I didn't want to have to explain similar mechanics or features in individual reviews, so threw them all into one. If you stayed this long to the end, thank you. This video is a passion project and a love letter to the birth of survival horror as a genre. These games have become my favourite of all time and are incredibly important to me, as someone who enjoys retro games and someone who loves this series and wants to see what comes next. I've been Roscoe M. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Hey everyone, this is Roscoe after the editing of this video was finished, and I just wanted to thank you again for watching and sticking around. This is now my longest review to date, which makes sense. I mean, I was covering 3 games, but yeah, this has been, as I said, a total passion project, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I can't wait to see what comes next. I don't know what review is going to happen next. I have a few of them that I might do, but yeah, this video has been working in the background for a little while. As you may have noticed by the fact that it's 40 fucking minutes. And that there was 3 games to play and script and talk about. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make this video. But anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.